Good day, good day, good day, everybody. Whew. Hope you're doing well. Welcome. Putting some lotion on my dry hands. My goodness. Hope everyone is doing well. Welcome to Sip with Red Melissa. I am Red Melissa, and SIP stands for Spirit in Practice, where we practice because practice makes progress. And we're all about that progress life. Yes, we are. So, welcome to a pre recording of Sip with Red Melissa. I'm pre recording about an hour before the show because I have a doctor's appointment that I totally forgot about. It somehow didn't make it onto my calendar. And thankfully, they sent a reminder. So here we go. Pre-recorded show. Please put in your comments and all the things that you would normally do. I will read it and we'll talk about it tomorrow when I'm back live. So welcome to Morning Sip. I am Red Melissa. I use the technology of spiritual psychology, spiritual practices, and universal principles to companion people in disrupting limiting patterns of thinking, limiting patterns of behaving by prioritizing their mind and their heart to reveal the healing from within. This is my ministry of joy, where I support people in living life in joy, connected to their yes. So if you need support, please DM me on my social media and we could set up some time to talk. I am a ordained interfaith minister, a licensed religious science practitioner, a spiritual life coach, and the spiritual director, senior minister at Rockland Center for Spiritual Living, a new thought center based in New York. Woo! Got that all in. All right, so let's get into it. Yesterday, we started a new series, and that series is Vulnerability. Vulnerability. And it was inspired by two things. One is my dear friend Sekou, who I often say to him, "You are so vulnerable. I just love how vulnerable you are." I say that to him often as feedback for the things that he shares as he is going through his journey of recovering from a stroke, and the things that he shares about himself on his show, the Be Your Own Hero show, which comes on Monday through Fridays at 9:45 a.m. Eastern Time. So if you haven't caught that show, you want to catch that show. And then the second inspiration is the April theme that we're walking into very soon. Saturday is the first day of April, right? And so the theme for CSL centers, many of them, is vulnerability, the power of vulnerability. And so that's what sparked my inspiration. And I decided, let's get into it now. So yesterday we started with the definitions. And so the dictionary definition, I shared many yesterday, but one that I want to share today is to show emotion or allow one's weaknesses to be seen or known. And the origins of the word vulnerability is to wound, okay? Now, someone that you all may be familiar with that does a lot of work, a lot of research about vulnerability is Brene Brown. So Brene Brown is a renowned researcher. She now is a speaker and on many platforms. She did a famous TEDx Houston that really solidified her in the mainstream. And she was talking about either shame, courage, vulnerability, or all three of those things because they're all interconnected. And this is how she describes vulnerability. She says vulnerability is the emotion that we experience during times of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. She also says that vulnerability is the birthplace of joy, belonging, creativity, authenticity, and love. right? So think about when you open yourself up in a new relationship, you are actually being vulnerable, right? You're being vulnerable to the possibility of love, right? So you are exposing yourselves. Yes. She also says that vulnerability is not a weakness. A lot of times, being vulnerable is often connected or seen as or regarded as a weakness. And it is not a weakness. It takes a lot of strength and courage to be vulnerable, to expose yourself, right? Not knowing what you might get back, right? Willing to take that risk, willing to be in the uncertainty of it all. So Brene says, if we want greater clarity in our purpose or deeper or more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. So we know there are many paths, right, to our purpose. And Brene is offering vulnerability as one of those paths. And what I want to highlight is that vulnerability is an emotion. It is a feeling, right? That we feel vulnerable, right? It's not who we are, like every other emotion, right? It is not who we are, right? So when we say, I am vulnerable, what we really mean is, I am feeling vulnerable, right? I'm having the experience of vulnerability. Yes. And it's something that we get to engage in. Yes. To be engaged in the feeling tone of vulnerability. All right. So, I always say it's important for us to feel our feelings, but vulnerability is one of those feelings that oftentimes we try to avoid. And why? Because it feels really uncomfortable, right? To be raw, right? To like really open yourself up, because you may open yourself up to criticism, to negativity, to things that you don't want. But that's the risk that we take when we are allowing ourselves, giving ourselves permission to be authentic by being vulnerable. Yes? So there's a couple of things that I want to share that I was reading up on vulnerability, because you know how I do. I get into it, right? And I came across a lot of stuff by Brene Brown, but I also came across this article from WebMD of all places. And this woman was writing about the power of vulnerability and how to be vulnerable. And so one of the things that she shared that I want to share with you all as soon as I find it. Oh, there it is. I put it in my phone. Let me just pull it up. Is about, before I go there, let me say this, that when we are in when we're feeling vulnerable, we can also recognize that in the mix of that, there is something that we are craving. Yes, there's something that we are craving. And so Brene Brown would say what we're craving is belonging, connection, love, things of that nature, right? We're also craving courage and empathy and creativity. But oftentimes what shows up are other feelings, right? And we're like, oh, shoot, right? I'm feeling vulnerable, but why am I also feeling like shame or guilt? Why am I also feeling some anxiety, right? Why am I feeling uncertainty about what I'm about to do or what I have done or said or shared, right? So that's also in the mix. So I bring that up to say that just because you're feeling vulnerable, and just because you may be feeling anxiety about it, doesn't mean for that you shut down, that you back away, that you step away, that you avoid feeling vulnerable. Because vulnerable leads us. more deeply into who we are, right? It's a path, it's a journey, right? And one of the things that Brene Brown says is that vulnerability is a path of joy, or joy is a path of vulnerability, either way, right? So vulnerability can also lead us more into, you know where I'm going, our quality, right? The path of vulnerability can also lead us more deeply into our quality. But we have to be very vigilant about not putting on the armor, right? To block it, to resist it, right? To take that risk of uncertainty, to take that risk of emotional exposure, right? By doing all the things that we need to do to honor ourselves, right? And at the same time, to allow ourselves to feel vulnerable. All right. So I want to share from this article, and it's called How to Be Vulnerable. And it's written by, I wrote down her name, Liliana Hogan, and it's on WebMD. And so one of the things that she talks about is how we could put on that armor, right? And what some of that armor could look like and feel like. So when we're in the midst of craving vulnerability, because we're craving the experience of joy or connection or belonging, right? We need to be aware that what might come up is, oh, wait a minute, this is too much. I've done gone too far. Let me put on my cloak, right? And then we start to shut down. Yes, we start to shut down. So this is what that vulnerability armor may look like. Perfectionism. There we go. Perfectionism. Numb. We could just go numb. And catastrophizing. So I want to dig into those a little bit. This is what she says in the article. Okay. My phone just did something weird. I'm just trying to fix it. Okay. So perfectionism. Why can't I say that word? Perfectionism. So I can raise my hand that I could find myself here. You think if you can become perfect, you can avoid being seen. So one of the ways we avoid the feeling of vulnerable is by being or thinking that we're being perfect. Perfectionism, right? We hide behind being seen, being exposed by positioning ourselves as I'm just perfect. Like nothing, all is well here. Nothing, you know what I mean? It's a subtle thing. So perfectionism. You think if you can become perfect, you can avoid being seen. It doesn't work. The next one is numbing. So numbing out. She says while this is effective in minimizing the gravity of negative emotions, it also numbs out the positive emotions. What do I always say? Feel your feelings. Don't numb your feelings, because there is information in our feelings. There's information in our emotions. So don't numb out. And when you feel yourself going that way, check in and say, am I avoiding the feeling of vulnerability? What is going on with me? Right? And then the third one is catastrophizing. I don't do that as much as I used to. I really don't do it at all. Well, maybe itsy bitsy bit, maybe teeny weeny itsy bitsy, but catastrophizing. That is imagining all the ways things can go wrong. Instead of being vulnerable and accepting how precarious your happiness and the things you love are, you beat vulnerability to the punch. So just thinking the worst of things, right? To avoid taking that risk. So before you even put yourself out there, you done talk yourself out of it by just imagining the worst. And I know from experience, it's never as bad as I imagined it would be. And I also know from experience that it's usually better than I imagine it would be. You see how both of those things work? It's never as bad as I imagine, and it's usually better than I imagine. So we could stop catastrophizing and instead step into the vulnerability, step on the path, right? Because that path is leading us more to what it is that we are craving to experience in our lives. Number one, our quality, whatever that is for you. Everyone, if you're on here and you don't know what I'm talking about, what I'm talking about is in January. And since January, we chose a quality of God, a high vibration quality that we want to embody more, that we are embodying more, that we are affirming, declaring, commanding, right? For our lives for 2023. So vulnerability, being vulnerable is also the opportunity to expose ourselves more deeply as that quality. So if you don't have your quality yet, please choose one, write it in the comments, and I will add you to the list. All right? So if you're craving belonging and joy and courage and love and empathy and creativity, allow yourself to be open to being more vulnerable, especially to be more vulnerable with yourself. There's an aspect within ourselves that is craving to know you even more deeply, more authentically. And so some of the armor that we have is not for the world. It's the armor that we have on against ourselves, right? How often do you catastrophize about your own self, beating yourself up, calling yourself names, all of the things? How many times do you just numb yourself against yourself? When feelings start to bubble up, you shut it down, right? So being vulnerable with ourselves is where we get to practice. Let's practice being vulnerable with ourselves. Ourselves are not requiring us to be perfect. Just to practice with grace and with ease, with consistency, with commitment, with deliberateness, to just practice. That is all that is required here. Yes? All right, y'all. All right. So we're going to continue on our vulnerability journey. I hope that was good for you. Let me know. Put it in the comments. And we're going to get into some joy news. So I am ecstatic because you'll know yesterday I shared that I realized April 6th is my anniversary, 3 years of being live on Facebook, of doing what is now called Morning Sit with revmelissa. My anniversary is April 6th. I did the very first live April 6th, 2020. And I can't believe it's almost 3 years. I can't believe it. And talk about vulnerability. Woo! Yes, I stepped into vulnerability. Oh my goodness. I stepped into vulnerability, and what I have discovered and recovered is my joy, right? More joy by being vulnerable. I'm going to share my very first live with you all next week. And y'all will see what vulnerability looked like because it was a hot mess. It was a hot mess. So please join me next week. I'm calling it Joy Week. And it is an invitation for anyone to join me on a show, one of the shows next week on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Friday. Drop me a DM. Let me know if you would like to be on the show. I will also be sending out a DM to some of you to join me on the show. I did this last year. We had a wonderful time. And then Joy Day is April 6th. And on Joy Day, do you know what we will be doing? Oh, this is the first time this is lined up this way. We will be doing our meditation with the moon on Joy Day, April 6th, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, right where you're watching me now on New Thought Media Network. And let me just say, New Thought Media Network, Robert, thank you so much for reaching out to me and for inviting me to be a part of New Thought Media Network. It has been absolutely amazing for me. So stay tuned for more happenings next week. Joy Week and Joy Day on April 6th. This Sunday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, two things happen. One is the other sip called Sunday in Praise, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, right where you're watching me now. I share an inspirational talk, a Sunday sermon with you all. So please tune in for that. And at the very same time at 10:30 a.m., we will be having our Sunday celebration service at Rockland CSL, where I am the spiritual director, senior minister. We meet in person the first Sunday of the month. So that is this Sunday, April 2nd, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We have service at the Rhino Comedy Club. That's right, at a comedy club, y'all. So y'all know we have a good time. And if you can't join us in person, you can also join us on Zoom and on Facebook. We stream live on Facebook. So go to rocklandcsl.org. All the information is there for the Zoom link, for the in-person address, and the Facebook Live. I hope to see you all somewhere in person, Zoom, Facebook. I hope to see you 10:30 a.m. this Sunday. As I said, our theme for April is the power of vulnerability. And my message on Sunday is aligning and defining. So I'm looking forward to that. All right. Let's see what else I like to share. Oh, so I have a new class coming up. I have a new class coming up called Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life. Tuesdays from 6:30 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, starting on April 25th through May 23rd. That's 5 Tuesdays, 6:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's all about transforming your life. And specifically, we're going to be working in relationships, money, and health. So it's time, y'all. It's time for those areas of our lives to transform. So if you would like to register, you can go to rocklandcsl.org. All the information is there. The cost is $170. If you register before April 1st, it's $145. And if you are a member of Rockland CSL, the cost is $145. It's going to be an amazing class. So please join me for that and register early, y'all. Register early. Live the prosperous life by getting that early bird price. Okay? All right. The last thing I want to share is what I am just so looking forward to. My installation ceremony is happening on May 6th, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm being installed as the minister at Rockland CSL. It is in person. It is at the Rhino Comedy Club. We're having the ceremony at 12:30 and right after a reception across the street at a wonderful restaurant. Evites have gone out. Everyone in the sound of my voice, you are also invited, but we need to know if you're coming. So please, you could DM me your email address and I will send you, or I have the person who's managing this send you the Evite. Okay? All right. So May 6th is right around the corner, y'all. May 6th, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time at Rhino Comedy Club. We'll also be streaming it on Zoom and on Facebook if you can't make it in person. All right, y'all. So that's all the news that I have to share, all the joy news today. I hope everyone is doing well. I will be back tomorrow live as we continue on our path of vulnerability. Remember, be gentle and kind with yourself. Be gentle and kind with yourself as you are being vulnerable with yourself. Yes? All right. So peace and blessings, peace and justice. We're living life in joy. Connected to our yes.